Thank you. All right, so thank you for everyone for indulging me for just 10 minutes before then some Q&A and then lunch. So I'm Dr. Jenn Stephenson from Queen's University, and you'll see that there's two names here on the screen. I want to give a shout out to Mariah Horner here, who is my research partner. And if I keep saying we, that's not because I think I'm a royal we, it's because me and Mariah are sharing a brain at the moment. And this is our project, Play Dramaturgies of Participation. And what I was thinking about after I made these slides and I realized I was already on the plane, I realized that none of my examples, none of the works that I want to talk about are in fact digital. And I thought, well, what am I doing here? And had a moment of imposter syndrome. And then I realized, no, it's okay. The question that we were asking here on day 3 is, as I recall, how do we bring the audience to the work? And what I want to suggest is actually, for live theater, we're bringing the work to the audience. These are audiences that think about interaction. They expect to participate. They expect to be asked for their input. These are audiences that are raised in social media, immersed in Web 2.0, and so they are eager for a different kind of audience experience, and they're moving away from traditional forms, and live theater is responding. So this is our project. Mariah and I have collected more than 70 case studies. We're mostly looking at Canada, although not exclusively, and our case studies are mostly within the last 3 to 5 years. They're very, very, very contemporary, so this is a field that is booming. And then the goals of our study broadly, what is it when we say participatory theater? What are we talking about? What doesn't count as participatory theater? When is it? Certainly it's now. So we're asking why now? What are the circumstances that are bringing artists to make this kind of work? And what is bringing audiences to it in droves? This kind of work is immensely popular, especially among young people. I go to see participatory works, and I am the oldest person in the room. That almost always happens. What does it mean? What can this work do? And we're thinking both with regard to specific cases. What is this particular play? What is this particular experience trying to communicate? And then what is the genre as a whole apt? Where is its strengths in terms of communication? We ask about ethics. Is it good? And we're asking about where is it going? So this is the scope of the project. We've been working together for about a year now. Next. Okay, this is a diagram that I have stolen from an earlier work, and as David Maggs was saying this morning, sometimes older work brings new perspective on what's happening now. This is Espen Arseth in his book Cybertext, 1997, and I get a great kick out of this because he has no idea what is coming next. And he's writing about literature. He's writing about hypertextual literature. He's writing about things like Michael Joyce's work Afternoon, if you're aware of that, is a hypertext novel. He's looking at early multi-user dungeons, those kinds of things, and he's trying to figure out what is going on with this as literature, and he's thinking about readers. He's not thinking about drama. He's certainly not thinking about video games, or in a very preliminary way. And this is his model. And I just want to flag this word he has here. He's invented this word ergodic, which means work. He's taking erg and marrying it to the word hodos path, so we have a work path. He's thinking about work that is being done by users, and I'm going to talk about these 4 categories. So Mariah and I have started to adapt Arseth's model. We find it very useful. It's not the last word on the subject, but at the moment we're finding it useful to think about what are audiences doing. So it's a way of thinking about audience function. So audience is an interpretive function. Audiences are active. We recognize that all audiences are active. Even you sitting there quietly are active in this way insofar as that you are interpretive. And example of this, again, typical bourgeois theater, 19th century, fourth wall, sitting in the dark, that kind of thing. The work those audiences are doing falls into this category. Next on his list, explorative, and so we move from a passive audience to an ergodic audience. And in this type of work, I think of the audience as being a camera. The audience is mobile. The audience moves through an environment. The audience is selecting what to look at and how much time to spend in different spaces. Sometimes the audience opens things up. The main work then is seeking, navigating, finding, and revealing. So this kind of exploratory work. I think This Is Nowhere that Alex was talking about falls into that category. Archive of Missing Things is also, to a large extent, this kind of explorative environment. I just want to flag one of the earliest of these works anywhere is a Canadian work called Tamara by John Cruikshank, 1981. It toured to both New York and LA and was a huge phenomenon. I think we've forgotten that Tamara was a groundbreaking work in this field. It's, it's Sleep No More, but like in the 80s.
Yeah, and it was very influential for me.
Did you see it?
I didn't see it, but I read it, and like the way that the content and the form are married is so smart.
Yeah, and we're getting back to it. It's kind of having a renaissance. Okay, constructive. So next level on in RSS typology that again we're finding very useful. The audience becomes a contributor. RSS says that there are keyholes. The audience is the artists provide keyholes. The audience have keys, and we fill those keyholes. Mariah and I joke that these are basically Mad Libs. The audience is given a fill in the blank. So what the audience is doing, filling blanks, answering questions, responding. Our choices have consequences. So we fill in the blank, and that changes what happens next. So in that respect, we are constructing the experience. Milton mentioned foreign radical. Foreign radical, I think, works in this way where audience choice, as Milton says, the way you answer the question, you then get sent off into another room, and that changes your whole experience of the work. And then the last piece that Arseth outlines, he calls it textonic. For him, audience members, readers, are creating textons. They're creating text blocks. We think that's not sufficient, and we've picked up this word emergent. I heard Pratim say emergent, Milton said emergent. We're thinking about this idea that what happens next is uncertain. It's completely dependent on what the audience says, that the work or the artist then responds is completely open and flexible. Obviously, there are levels of that. So then the main work the audience is doing is generative, creating new material, improvising, and we've got a couple of examples of this, which I'll talk about more. But the idea is that action is it's autopoiesis. It's a feedback loop, and so it's very responsive to what's going on and highly uncertain, ergodic, and dynamic. So then this shifts thinking about audiences from being primarily auditory or primarily spectators to being players, and I found that that's a really comfortable term to think about what they're doing. This is Salin and Zimmerman. Meaningful play arises when actions, that ergodic quality that Arseth identifies, have impacts. So actions have impacts, and then what we're doing is meaningful. The contribution of the audience is making a difference. And so then questions that Mariah and I are asking about agency, how agency affects impacts. We ask, how big is the sandbox? Given this play space, is it wide but shallow? Or is it narrow but deep? Are my impacts real? Am I really having a difference, or is it kind of a what Nicolas Bourriaud calls phony multiplicity, that we're not really getting? Sometimes we're not really making an impact. We're getting fake choices. Sometimes not. And then questions about actions. We're interested in how conventions that shape player behavior are very different from those that shape audience behavior. So what happens when an audience becomes a player? The rules change, we get a lot of uncertainty, and we need to be guided through that process. And then it's on the artist makers to think about how players are told what to do and sometimes what not to do. Specifically, I want to think just in about 5 minutes about what players give and what players get. So players give. When you're a player, there's things that we are contributing, and the ultimate takeaway, or sort of where we're at right now thinking about, is what players tend to give is me. I give my physical labor, I give my emotional labor, I'm giving my intellectual input, I'm answering questions. This is a very narcissistic form, where participatory theater tends to be by me, for me, and about me in various kinds of ways. The audience player is really at the center of the experience in so many ways. What players get. Again, Mariah and I are trying to categorize these. We've come up with roughly these 5 categories of what do players get back from their contribution, and what do we get out of it. These are the 5 categories, and I have some examples. So this is a play called Bonjour High. It comes out of Quebec. It's a collective. Literally, audiences get money. Audience players are asked to do mundane tasks like sort socks and make sandwiches, and they get paid real cash dollars. And this play is a really, I think, smart critique of thinking about neoliberal labor and thinking about how audience volunteerism is being used to make art, and who walks away with the cultural capital at the end. It's not the audience. So I think this is really kind of smart and critical. Lost Together. This is a play where you give an autobiographical story of loss, and these artists, Shira Luchter and Michaela Washburn, they give back to you the thing you've lost as a miniature sculpture. And it's so moving, the thing they've given back to you. So you give them a story of loss, and they return the object to you, transformed by their artistry. It's very, very moving. So I'm going quickly. The red light is flashing here.
Just ignore the red light.
Okay, I will.
Yeah, it's totally fine.
Another thing that audiences get, arousal. This is not my term. This is Michael Apter, who writes about danger and about the psychology of thrill. Audiences get a physical experience. We have that excitement, that kind of like heart pounding, sweating, my body's moving, this is so exciting, my adrenaline is up. That is also a frequent thing that we get from participatory theater. This is a play called Counting Sheep, which is a Ukrainian guerrilla folk opera, where the audience players are involved in reenacting the protests from the Maidan revolution in Kiev in about 2015. And so we throw bricks. They're not real bricks. We throw foam bricks. We build barricades. We participate. We dance. We eat. There's a funeral, et cetera. And the audience becomes the crowd, all set to klezmer rock folk music. It's all in Ukrainian. It's awesome. Milton said escape rooms. Escape rooms, Mariah and I are finding, are also part of this phenomenon. It's popular, they're commercial, but they are responding to a demand for participation. This is what people want, and the work is responding. This is Escape from the Tower, which is at Casa Loma in Toronto, and what audiences are getting is win. There's no win condition in drama, but when you marry drama to games, you get win, which again is a different kind of an outcome. And then finally, recognition, this idea that we need to be seen, we need to be heard as individuals, and participatory art can do that. And it can take in our input and ask us questions, and we feel like we're being responded to. This is for an exchange. Briefly, they put $1,000 cash on the table and then ask you questions about what things are worth to you. How much would you spend for brunch? How much would you spend on a new outfit? How much do you love your mother? And they start asking those kinds of questions about money and value to really dig into your own personal experience. What is taken from players, I would love to say more about this. Audiences give things, but sometimes things are taken without our permission. This is a show that Mariah saw in New York. It's an opera called Looking at You. And in this play, this opera, they take your social media. They take it, and then they display it as part of their scenography. To what extent you've given permission for that is a question, and we think a lot about consent and about what consent looks like in participatory theater. Signing a waiver at the beginning may not be enough. That doesn't jive with how we now understand consent to be ongoing. And so there's some gaps there. And that's us. Okay.